Okay, so the next bits we can get on with is actually getting the seat together and bringing the sort of cockpit parts together prior to painting. One thing I failed to mention that I was just doing is actually putting the photo etch brake handle onto the back of the actual grip itself. So that one's in there if you're wondering how about that part. Now, same thing again, I'm not going to paint the seat separately. We're going to do it all together, paint all of this interior green, and then pick out all the details. So the same goes with the seat as well. So basically, we've got the seat has all been cleaned up, a little bit of extra thin, and then we've got part F48, which is going to fit right on the bottom and fit in just like that with all the holes facing upwards. So that's in, so we just give a touch of glue just around there, and now we can go on with the actual side parts of the seat. There again, there's a little bar just down in between these things, you need to cut them out. So that's those out. So then what we can do, you've actually got the little prongy parts are actually going to go to the rear. So if we just put a little bit of glue just down the bottom, just like so, and then we can just fit the sides of the seats on. So obviously these parts are off to the rear just like that. Touch of glue, and if you're using the extra thin, you can just let the capillary action do all the work and whiz round it all. Now if you've got a situation where you're finding it hard to hold it, just pop a pair of spring-loaded clamps on like that, and it just helps everything along. So we just go like that. We can pop those bits in. So there we go, that's our seat sections in. Happy there, make sure you're all squared up and you're happy as they are. Then what you can do, you can just pop a little bit of extra thin on the inside and let the capillary action run around those joints. Now on this, you've got a little handle. There again, you need to clean up those little parts just a little bit, but he's going to fit down in this hole right down in here. So you've got a little ratchet part. There we go, he fits in the side of the seat just like so, just like that. So that's that one in. If you line it up with it as it goes backwards, and we'll just put a tiny drop on the top part, just like so, and that's our seat bit done. Now obviously we've got handles and things like that, so we do, obviously, you know, and the belts and things, we'll put them on last, so don't worry about the instructions now, because obviously when we go around and spray it all, we can then do the belts all separately and put them in sort of afterwards. So we'll just let that dry off for a second, so it should dry quite quickly. Now on your photo etch parts, you've got number A30, which is this metal, which is actually the back armoured plate. So obviously it's got a little cut-out section of the way it fits. It's going to fit down the back. So what we'll do is we're just going to slide this over and in, and hopefully it will all sit into its right locations. And then what you've got, some little tabs at the back. And then what we're going to do, same thing again, we've got the glue's just drying out a little bit, so we put a spot of glue just down out of sight. And then obviously we've got these three little tabs at the back. We're just going to give it little drops, super glue right over the back, and a bit of a rub around. You're not going to be able to see these because obviously you've got another plate that's going to go on the back of this and so forth. So once that's on like that and you're quite happy, you can then move on up to part 8. And in part 8 we've got these parts here, which is F57, and we've got this part, whoops, we've got this part here, which is F52. So what you need to do is snip out this centre section in here. So using our scissors, we just snip them out, and then we just clean up little parts. There again, we don't have to be totally attention to detail in here because we're not going to be able to see it, but we just want to make it all nice. So that's that part off, and then what happens is these are going to go in the back here. So to start with, we've got the under part, which is going to go under here. So what we do, we're going to put a drop of glue at the back here. Okay, and then this will fit in just like that. So it just sits in the back, facing upwards slightly. Okay, now normally you'd let this dry off a little bit before putting this on, but just for the moment of time, we'll just move this on a little bit. And then obviously what we've got is these two parts here. So these little, where you've got the tabs at the rear, is going to all face backwards. So it's getting a little bit fiddly here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to pop a little bit of glue on the ends of the feet all over it, and we can give a little bit more in a moment, but then hopefully these will all go in and line up. And it all does fit like a glove, so you shouldn't have too much of a worries getting in there. But there we go, once they're in, you can just give a little drop more glue just around the edges and that, just to make sure you've got a nice join on there, just like that. But there we go, that's very straightforward for the seat. Continuing on that, we've got another plate of armour, which if we just sit this gently down here, we've got the triangle one at the back. There again, make sure you got the right one, because there's 3 different types of this. So this is A27 right here, and in the meantime also what we've done, we've cleaned up part number F19, which is the rear former, if you like, that's going to go behind the cockpit, which is really going to hold it all together. Now what we're going to do, we're then just going to pop this plate, will hopefully go straight onto here. So you've got various little holes. Same thing again, we're just going to pop these over the holes. So it just sits on the back just like that. A tiniest drop of glue. Obviously you just want a tiny little bit, and it'll act like a bolt on top anyway. And if it is a little bit too much, just grab yourself a cotton bud, just like this, okay, and just soak some off, and it should pull it all back, and it will absorb it into the cotton bud. Make sure you throw it away, because also it will scratch your paintwork. And there we go, that dries them off. Nice little tip that. But as I say, if it dries on there, it should dry as like a little bolt head or a weld head, so you shouldn't have any troubles with that one at all. So at the same time, before we just attach that, what you can do is on the other side, you've got parts number F25, F24 and F19. Now that's these little guys right here. Now I've cleaned these up a little bit already, and they're going to go on the back. Now these are going to be painted separate, they're going to be jet black when they go on, so there again you can paint them before they go on or after, it's personal choice. I'm going to pop them on first, and we're going to go around and say and pick everything out afterwards. So that's one on just like that. Okay, and then we just put a bit of glue, and then this one can go on, which is just on the back, just like so. Just goes on there. Okay, then what you've actually got is another one which is going to fit to this rear bar. So we're just putting a bit of glue along that rear bar. And then hopefully, if we get this around the right way, we want it to be that way. This one will sit right on the top there, just like that, and we can pick all those out afterwards. Okay, so what we'll do, we're just carefully holding this now. I'm going to put a blob of extra thin in all the locating holes, and then hopefully this will all come together. If we've got this all right, it should just all fit in. So we'll start at the tops, make sure they're in, and in the bottoms, and there we go. So there we go, we've got the blast, the bulkheads in there now, the bulletproof ones, and the seat. So we're all happy how all that's sitting. It's all nicely finished. So we'll just leave that down for one section, but that's those bits like that. Now in the meantime, you've actually got the bottom of the actual cockpit here, cleaned up all the parts. This is where it's all going to sit to and make up the actual area. So the same thing again, we've got another former for the rear of the actual cockpit section. That's going to go onto the rear one here. If I have it around the right way might help. Okay, so there again, make sure you get it around the right way. Obviously it's quite easy because it's got a lot of detail on one side and none on the other. So we're just going to pop this guy in right down the back here. Okay, and he's a simple push fit down in there, and he'll drop all the way to the bottom, and you can hold that a sec. Okay, then same in here again, just to each side, bit of extra thin going on just like that. Okay, and then we've got this one will drop in here. Okay, now normally I would let these dry off just a little bit before we sort of keep going on and on and on with these things, but because we're in a bit of a rush, not too much of a rush that we want to ruin this, but a little bit of a rush because we want to move on. Okay, and then obviously we've got the cockpit section itself. It's going to fit in here, so if we put this under first, all going to go in. Okay, so we can just run a little bit of extra thin around, just in all these areas, and then it should give us good access to get back in here for doing all the painting and various things we're going to have to do. Okay, so we're just making sure got these all in right positions. There we go, just like so. Now at the top here we've got a little former, so what we'll do is we'll do this without glue and then with glue, so we'll just pop this on the top. Okay, and this one is going to fit in like that, so we're just going to give a touch of glue just like that. Okay, and we've got another one that's going to go in the bottom, which is this part here, which is F17, but we'll put that on in a moment when things get a little bit more stiff, just like that. So there we go, that's the cockpit section all done. Quite happy with how that's all turned out. Obviously, you know, we've got more harnesses to go in and things like that, but we're going to do those all afterwards. Don't worry about that too much at the moment. We can take care of those afterwards, but that's the actual cockpit section. So by the time we get this all painted up, then we're going to go around and pick out all the little details and everything else like that. It will really bring it all to life. Also, we're going to do some dry brushing on there and bits and pieces like that. Okay, so for the gun sight, you've got two types here. You've got the A and B, which is very simple. We've got this one here, and literally that's just parts number L17 and L11, which go together, which make that particular one, which is the GM2 gun sight. Or you can have the Mike 2 gyro stabilized one, which is a little bit more complex. And basically you've got various parts that are going to go together to make up this one just here. There again, just take your time with it and work your way through. So both of them are straightforward slot fits straight into the instrument panel once you've built them up. We're doing here, which is the A version. So that is going to go in just like so into that slot, just like that, and away we go. So once it's painted up, we're absolutely fine. So just take your time with those, putting them together, and you'll be absolutely fine. So what we can do now, we can really start getting this together, and we're going to give it some paint. Okay, so now we get some paint on. We've got here Harder and Steenbeck airbrush. This is the 2-in-1. It's got the 0.2mm needle in there, and it's what we use for the entire build. Now for this one, what we're going to do it in sort of threefold type of thing. We're going to spray it all the green, which in this case is going to be XF71, which is the interior cockpit green. Go absolutely everywhere with it and cover everything. Next, so what we're going to do is come back and we're going to pick out all the details, obviously in black, and at the same time we can spray the instrument panel and do that black as well. Then afterwards we're going to come back and do a little bit of weathering with some dry brushing and with a little bit of a wash over it as well to really bring the details to life. So to start with, what we're going to do, we're just going to pop some X20A acrylic Tamiya thinners into the colour cup, just like that. And then what we'll do is we're just giving this a very good shake, which is the XF71. This is a new bottle of it, so it's had to have a very good mix. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're going to tip a 50-50 mix in with the thinners, just like so. We'll just pop that out of the way. Okay, and using a cocktail stick, we'll just give this a bit of a mix up. And then what we're going to do is just very lightly give this a coat. So we'll just check our flow to one side, make sure we're coming through all okay. And then what we're going to do, we're going to spray the entire inner workings green. So to start with, it's quite a light coat, making sure we're coming in from all the angles so everywhere's covered. And we're going to work our way back through this ribbing. There again, making sure both sides are all done. Back this tail wheel area. And we know we're not going to see a lot of this, but obviously, for argument's sake, it's far easier just to spray it all than it is to come back in a moment and realise you've missed a bit. So, same with this area back here. As I say, make sure you come in from all the angles. Make sure you're in from the tops and everywhere, just like that one. Okay, then obviously when you're doing complex areas like this, it's best to come in from just to lightly spray absolutely everywhere. And as I said, I know we've got a lot of various bits to pick out, and you could obviously do it separate, but I just find it easier to come back afterwards and spray them as a sort of an afterthought. And because it's quite an open cage system, we should be able to get in everywhere that we need to very easily. So just keep moving around, and if it's all looking a little bit too wet, just cut to air, i.e. just push down for air if you're using a double action airbrush, just to get in there all a bit easier. There we go, and then we can do the same with the sides. That one, okay, in with the other. There we go, that's those bits done. Come back to have a look at your first one to make sure you're happy with them all. Now if you wanted to, obviously you could light up panels, you could darken them, but because we're in such a confined area, there's not really a lot of point. You're not really going to see it. What you're going to see a lot more of is obviously using the washes, and at the moment we're going to use an acrylic wash just to sort of highlight some of the areas around the cockpit when it's totally dry. And things like that. So we'll leave sort of the airbrush weathering to a later time for when we're doing the actual major parts themselves. So what we do, we just tip the rest of that in there, just like so. We'll let that dry off, clean off the airbrush, and we can get on with picking out some detail. Okay, so we've moved on a little bit on this. What we've actually done is just pop round to all the painting and all the sort of boring bits. So what we've done, we've gone along and we've painted everywhere. So obviously just follow the instructions on the kit, they're absolutely fine for it. So we've done like the hydraulics for the rudder pedals, obviously that's been done with silver, XF 16 or something like that if you want to do aluminium, or certainly use the Citadels like I do sometimes with those. So we've popped around, we've done some of the black areas, obviously you know, obviously down we've done the seat, we've painted those. Same with the sides, we've picked out all the little details, some of them with little bits of white and things like that, and then obviously it all comes together something like this, which is a lovely little fit and comes together and gives you very, very nice effect. Now what I haven't done is put the belts on yet, as you might notice, but that's because I might install the pilot figure at a later date, I might not. So with that in mind, it's something that we can do later on if needed. So I'm going to make a decision near the sort of latter part of the build to decide if I'm going to have this with the gear down, or I'm going to use the stand, or perhaps I'll do a bit of both. Now the last thing really to do is to give it a wash, to give it just a little bit of depth and a little bit of shadowing. Now I've already been around and dry brushed absolutely everything. So we've been around with a little bit of XF54, popped around and just dry brushed everything, just to bring out the details and to give it a little bit of depth. Now to give it some shadowing, now obviously what we've got to do is actually give it some of a wash. Now there's two ways of doing a wash. You can either use something like the Pro Modeller's wash and give it like that, but it's a little bit too thick and a little bit too grainy, if you like, for this type of effect. So what we're actually going to do, we're going to actually airbrush on a wash onto this. So all we're going to do, we'll pop these down. We're just going to take our airbrush, flick on the compressor, because we want a nice high air pressure of about sort of 25 to 30 psi. We're going to take about 1.5 millimeters of thinners, and we're just going to pop that straight into the colour cup like that. Now we've got some standard flat black here, so I'm just going to get a paintbrush full like that, pop it in and give it a mix around. So it's just a very, very thin, it's not painting, it's not really sticking to anything. As you can see down here on the towel, it just washes away. So that's our wash that we're going to use. And then all we're going to do, just pop these out of the way. Keeping that away just for the moment. Just check our flow, make sure it's coming out. All we're going to do is just spray this on quite liberally everywhere. Now, because this has got thinners in it, don't touch it. Don't put your finger in it, because what you're going to do is actually take the paint off and you're back to square one. So we just put that on, cut into air, just dry it down a little bit, just knock off some of it, and then in again. Quite heavy. And we'll let that just stand there. Same with this one. Can go in, and then we're just going to come along with the other parts. We'll just hold these carefully somewhere that's not that noticeable. Okay, let it stand. This one at the back. And what this will do, it will just give us that shadowing effect. It will go in the rivets and bits and pieces like that. And obviously with just trying to keep this in all the areas. Try and come in from all the angles as you do it, and that way it will just help. Just mind where you're touching, as I say. Now when this dries, it's going to dry all flat and everything else like that, so don't worry about it too much. So if we just get this piece over here and we'll dry this down, hopefully you can see, or might be able to see, what we're trying to achieve here. So we just cut into air. Normally let this dry naturally on its own and you'll be fine, but I don't know if you can see already, we've got some dark parts appearing down here on the ribbing at the front, but you can give this as many coats as you need. But the only thing is you've got no control over this, so just keep it's best to have your paint thinner than thicker, and then that way if it just looks a little bit too thick, you know, you can take a bit off. And there we go, it's another heavy coat on there, because I think it just needs a little bit more, but you're just giving it a sort of shading as well as a dirty type of effect. I'll pop that one out of the way. This one's coming on quite nicely, but don't flood it too much, because obviously you don't want to take anything off. You're actually just trying to get an effect here rather than anything else. So there we go, that's those done. Quite happy, and as I say, it'll just dirty it, shade it, bits and pieces. Don't want to go over the top with it. Now obviously you could go around now if you wanted to and certainly do some chipping, you know, some scuffs, perhaps dry brushing some silvers, bits and pieces like that, to give it a more worn look. Myself, I'm going to leave it roughly as is for the moment. I can obviously pop back at a later time to actually give it a bit more of a scuff. So that's that bit done, just like that. Quite happy with how that's come out. The other thing as well, instrument panel, not touching that obviously. What I've actually done with this is that all we've actually done is come along, if I bring you in nice and close you can see, flat black, sprayed it, let it dry off, and then dry brushed the instrument panel with the XF54 again, just to give you a sort of the highlights. I don't want anything massively standing out. Popped around a little bit of silver around the areas where it's needed to be silver, and the red and the blue, went around with them. And then on the back, clear parts stuck in, left, used a little bit of gator glue with that, or PVA glue, so it doesn't matter if it shows through. And then on the back here are actually decals. Now these are off the decal sheet, and don't panic when you look at them, because yes, they are totally black and you think, oh my word, you know, they printed them wrong. Trust me, on the other side there's the actual colours. They went on, and then a drop of microsol on the back just to settle them down and make them conform and blend in, and so we got no air bubbles. So there we go, that one's totally done, as well as we've actually done the HUD, sorry, the gun sight I should say. Gun sight is all done, nice little touch. And then what we can do is we'll just let this wash dry off a minute, have a look at it, make sure we're happy with it, and if we are, we can bring it all together. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the cockpit sides on now and fixed in. Oxygen bottles are in at the back. It might be worth putting the black one in before or afterwards you put the sprue, because it's just a little bit tight getting it all in there, but it does all fit, which is the main thing. Now it's a little bit complex how this all goes together back here, and it doesn't call out for the actual front bulkhead, this one here, to be painted at this stage, nor does it mention anything about the tail wheel, but I've taken those and painted them green, and then at a later date we can obviously change those if we have to. So the tail wheel one, we're just going to sit this in with a little bit of extra thin. We'll just pop that in there. Okay, and it's the square higher end to the front. And it's just going to fit in the little tab just down there at the back. So we give a tiny bit of glue just down in there as well, and it should click into place. Same goes with the front one. So obviously we're going to put Nice bit of glue in that one, and then obviously these prongy parts face to the rear on this front bulkhead. There again, there's nice locating tabs where it's all going to sit, and what we'll do, we'll just pop a nice bit of glue around there so it seals itself. Okay, so that's those in just like that. And then next we can actually do is fit the cockpit. Now the cockpit itself can probably go in as a loose fit, so what we're going to do, we're going to test fit it first to see how it actually goes. So we're just going to pop it in, and we're going to line up with the rear one first. So we sit him in, line up with that rear bulkhead, all happy with how it's sitting, everything else like that. Close some space, and then what we'll do is we'll just see how it all is going to line up and how it's going to fit, and we can see if we've got clearances and so forth. So first of all, we'll just line up that tail wheel. I'm just going to pop a peg on the back just to hold that in place. Okay, then we're just going to check, see how the front sits in and everything else, and that's not any glue in there and there's no movement in there whatsoever. And as you can see, it's a fantastic fit. The detail looks great. Unfortunately, a lot of the ones you're going to lose now in amongst all of that in there. But as I say, looking just a little push. We've got no big seam lines. Everything else seems to fit fine. I've got no problem with that. The bulkheads are all in there, all okay. Happy with how they're all sitting. They all seem square and no trouble at all. And I'm probably not going to glue this actual main cockpit section in at all. I'm just going to probably leave it just as it is. Come along with some clamps. So we just get some more clamps out here. And what we'll do is, we'll be doing from the top. What we'll do, we're just going to clamp it just in the side, and we'll have another one just down here at the front. Happy with how they're set. Make sure we're nice and square in there to hold them in, and then there again we're going to check, make sure, but as you see we've got no big gaps running down the bottom seam line, which is where you would expect to get them, and we've got a tiny little one at the back here which goes with a little push. But there again, everywhere else is absolutely fantastically lined up. And okay, this is Tamiya and you expect it to be, but I didn't expect it to fall in quite as simple as that did. But there we go, that's those in. So we can just pop another little peg at the top. Check our instructions, make sure we haven't left anything out, make sure we got all the cockpit in. Yes, I'm still concerned about obviously putting seat belts and harnesses in, but I'm sure I can do them at a later date because they go to this rear part at the back, out here on the close-up one. So it is going to fit in there okay. Probably would be an idea not to actually install the HUD now if you're thinking about doing it afterwards. I've popped it in there, it's not glued in, so I could get that out, but it does stick up a bit and I'm worried about knocking that off now. But apart from that, we're very happy how that is all set. It's all in there absolutely fine. I've got no problems with any of that at all. So what we're going to do now, we're just going to come along and we're going to run a little bit of extra thin around these areas. So what we're going to do, we'll start with this front one. We're just going to let it flow. Just down in there, and then what we're going to do, we're just going to pop it in, those joins at the front in there. Happy with those, and then this bottom seam, there again, touch and let it flow off. And let the capillary action do all the work. And then what we can do, we can come along with a bit of Mr. Surfacer or whatever we need just to tidy them up. Now what we can do, we've got a tiny little step on this side, so we're just going to nudge it down just a little bit. Try not to get too gluey fingers. There again, just running it around and trying to let the capillary action do all the work if I can. I don't want to get too many glue marks around, so that's why we're just taking our time with it and letting it just touch and flow. Just up in those areas, and we just got a couple in the rudder box at the back, like that. Very happy with how that is. Very happy it went together. So what we're going to do, we're going to pop it down like that. We're going to leave it for about an hour, hour and a half to totally come off. Come back, unclamp it, have a good look at it, make sure we're all happy, and we can move on.